Hi and welcome back to Writer's Dream Coach. I'm Frau Möbius, German therapist, coach, and author. And today I'm going to talk about how to know where exactly a story starts. The thing is, you want to start a story exactly at the point where it begins to grip the reader. And sometimes that's a little difficult to determine, especially if we really fall in love with our world and our character and you know, our whole creation. And I know this is especially true for fantasy authors because we sit down, some do, I don't really, but many sit down and spend hours and days and weeks and months to create their world. They draw maps, they create cultures, entire cultures, magical systems, creatures of all kind, and that's huge. That's an enormous background, which is awesome to have, but some people fall in love with that background and they need to show it off, and some even forget the story about the background because the background seems so important to them. So, so one thing to remember is um, put the world into your story. Don't put the story into your world. The worst example, and I posted about that on the blog already. Um, I read a story, a fantasy novel, where the main character was taken on a tour around the region, meeting the king, visiting a nice big lake, meeting several kinds of dragons. And once that character returned to their training camp, basically, that's when the whole story started. I mean, that's when the action began. And that was like 4 chapters into the book. And I was reading it because I had promised. I didn't finish it. And I was not surprised that this author didn't sell any of his sequels because that doesn't work that way, especially if you're in Kindle Unlimited, where you get paid per page read. More or less, Amazon is still not good about that, but basically, in more or less, you get paid per page read. You want to keep the story moving. You want to keep it clipping along at a fast pace so your readers don't put the book down or pick it up again if they have to. So, again, back to where the story starts. It basically starts where the action starts. And I know characters have story before the action starts. It's called backstory for a reason. Of course, something happens when they're born, or maybe something happens earlier, and you have a magical artifact in the game that needs to be created. This is all part of your world. It's not necessarily part of your story. Start where the action is. Start where things are moving. The moment when your hero decides to go on her journey, or that moment uh, when um, well, if you write a thriller, when they find the first body, when the first shot gets fired, that's where a story starts. That's where it starts rolling and moving, and where things happen and people make decisions, and armies start moving, that kind of stuff. That's where your story starts. It does not start with the backstory. It does not start with the creation of your world, and it does not start with Adam and Eve. No, it starts where things get moving. I sometimes start my own stories literally with a shout, or with a serious action. The science fiction story and the trilogy I'm writing right now, the first part begins with the sentence, "It was over." And of course, it's the start of the story, so it's not over, but um, that is what my character is thinking, because his previous life is over, and a big change is happening, and he has to face an entirely different life. The title is Captive. He gets caught, and he needs to adapt to a new kind of life. So that's where the story starts. And of course, I mean, my guy is like 28 years old. He has a life. He has a lover, as we'll find out. He has um, a group of people he lives with. He has a home. But we won't find out about that until much later, because that is not part of the story. It's just part of the background. And we also won't find out until much later what really happened, uh, and why his captors are there and why are they doing what they're doing. The story starts the moment his old life ends and his new life as a captive begins. And you need to find that point in your story where it takes off, where this this moment in time happens when things fundamentally make a difference for your character. And this is even more true if you write short stories. The definition of a short story is basically an extraordinary event in your character's life. So in a short story, you have no business explaining a lot of backstory, except, by slipping it into the story as needed. That's art. Um, you don't want chapters and chapters of description in your story. You don't want God's pages and pages of what the queen is wearing in the throne room today. And no, you need to keep the action moving, and you need to practice and look for that. I mean, read other books and look for that. Whenever I run into a fantasy novel with pages of description, I just kind of flip them. I don't care. Yes, it is helpful to know whether your characters are wearing whatever, leather, jeans, or winter parkas. But you don't need pages and pages of description, and those are going to bore most readers unless you write in a niche where it is needed. If you write a specific kind of romance, if you write a specific kind of fantasy, maybe that's where you will need long descriptions. That's what you need to know as an author. You need to know the rules and habits of your genre. But again, that will also tell you more about when to start the story. So take what I'm saying here in the context of what you're actually writing. Take it in the context of the genre you're aiming for, of the market. And yes, writing to market is not bad. You need to know your market in order to sell well. But either way, you need to keep the reader interested in your story, in your character, and that means stuff must be happening. It sounds really simple, but I realize that if you're doing this for the first time, it's a little hard to decide. So read. Look at beginnings of stories. That's the easiest part. You can just go into Amazon and use the look inside feature and see how other authors begin their stories, and you can take a look at the bestsellers in your genre and look at the opening sentences and the opening chapter, because that's what you'll be able to read and learn how they are doing it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, and for heaven's sake, don't try to be extremely original. You can choose an interesting beginning, yes, and I'll talk about the first sentence next week, but start where the action begins. Throw your character into the middle of things. Don't lose yourself on a sightseeing tour of an awesome fantasy world, and start writing. And honestly, you can always change it, but you can't edit a blank page. So start writing that story. It is possible that once you're in, especially if you're like me, not a full plotter, you might realize that the story starts a little elsewhere. That is fine. You're allowed to change it. You're allowed to write a shitty first draft. You're allowed to edit whatever you have to make it better. But start at the beginning. Start where the action goes. You know, remember that old movie thing where they had this board that they kind of clap and then they call action. That's for the scene to start in the movie filming, but that's what you need to keep in mind with your story. Start it where the action starts. Now, I have a few tapping sentences below. If you need more encouragement, you can send me email if you have questions, and I love getting email because it helps me figure out what you need. I also offer coaching sessions. For now, it's just a very simple package system, but I'm on my way working out some awesome author systems and packages for you to make your author career much easier and much more fun. And I'll talk to you again next week. Until then, bye bye.